Madonna in fur coat. One of the people I've come across so far is on me. Perhaps it had the greatest impact. Even though it's been months, somehow I could not get rid of the effect. Whenever I'm alone with myself, Rafe. The pure face of the Lord, a little out of the world, yet a human. Their gazes that want to smile when they meet. Comes to life before my eyes. However, he is a wonderful man. It wasn't even a very ordinary, no special, everyday. Of the people we see around us and pass by without looking. Was one. In the aspects of his life that we know and do not know. It was clear that there was nothing to worry about. Such people. When we see it, we often ask ourselves, what are these? Why do they live? What do they find in life? What logic? What logic? The text commands them to roam the earth and breathe. But while we think about it, we only look outside of those men. They are also. Their heads are doomed to work in it whether they want it or not. They each have a brain, as a result of this, according to them. We never think that they will have an inner world. This realm. Seeing that they do not give out their manifestations. Instead of judging what they do not live with the simplest human incarnation, this. If we wonder about the unknown world, maybe we will see things we never expected. It is possible for us to encounter riches that we do not expect. But people for some reason rather guess what they'll find. They prefer to research. Known to have a dragon at its bottom. To find a hero to go down the well, surely, what is at the bottom? A person who will dare to descend into an unknown well. It's easier than finding it. I also have a closer look at Raif Effendi. I don't know, it is just a coincidence. After being fired from my junior position at a bank, why? I still don't know if I was fired, they just told me to save, but I was looking for a job in Ankara for a long time. 5. My dime money made sure I got through the summer without crawling, but approaching winter, end of sleeping on cedars in friends' rooms. He had to come. The restaurant that will be finished in a week. I didn't even have enough money to renew his report card. And I am sure that many of the acceptance exams that I have taken knowing that they will not come out. For some reason he is sad again when the end is not over, unaware of friends. As a result, the rejection response from the stores I applied for as a clerk. When I got it, I was wandering around in despair until midnight. A few acquaintances. Even at the drinking tables, to which I was occasionally invited by. I couldn't forget your despair. Oddly enough, my distress increased and even making it impossible for my needs to get me out of today. To the extent that he came, my shyness and embarrassment increased. I had applied before for them to find me a job and it wasn't bad at all. When I run into some acquaintances I haven't been treated like on the street. I was bowing my head and passing swiftly, eat me before that I freely asked them to feed and borrowed money without getting bored. I even changed to my friends. "How are you doing?" saying. When they ask, with a clumsy smile, "Not bad." Rarely. "I find temporary asterisk jobs." She replies, and immediately. "I was running. The more I need people, the more I run away from them." That's how much I needed it. One day, in the afternoon, on the secluded road between the station and the Sergivi. Walking slowly, I sip Ankara's wonderful autumn to the fullest. I wanted to create an air of Nikbin in my soul by pulling people's house, reflecting from its windows, drowning the white marble building with blood-colored holes. The sun rises above the acacia trees and pines and is it mist, dust, unidentified smoke, any? Returning from the construction and in her tattered clothes, she's quiet and a little hunchbacked. Walking laborers with patches of car tire marks on them. Asphalt. They all seemed content with their presence. Everything was accepting everything as it was. So me too. There was nothing else to do. That's right. A car quickly passed me by. I turn my head and look. At the time, I thought I recognized the face behind the glass. Indeed, the car. After 5 or 10 paces he stopped, his door opened. Hamdi, one of my school friends, was calling me with his head down. I was stung. "Where are you going?" asked. "Nothing, I'm wandering." "Come to us." "Let's go." He made room for me without waiting for my answer. As he said on the way, it came from visiting some of the factories of the company he worked for. I telegraphed home about my arrival. I guess they made preparations. Otherwise I wouldn't have dared to invite you. I laughed. Hamdi, whom I have seen often since I left the bank. I had not seen. Machinery and other brokerage, also. He is an assistant manager in a company dealing with forestry and timber works. And I knew you were getting pretty good money. In my unemployed time. That's pretty much why I didn't apply, asking him to find a job. He thinks I came to ask him to donate money, not to give money. I hesitated. "Are you always at the bank?" asked. "No. I left." I said. He was amazed. "Where did you go?" Reluctantly. I replied, "I'm open." He looked me up and down, looked at my attire, went home. He must not have regretted that he had invited him, for he waved his hand with a friendly smile, tapping my shoulder. "We'll talk tonight and find a cure, don't mind," said. He looked content and confident. So now. He even had the luxury of helping acquaintances. I envied. He lived in a small but cozy house. A little ugly, but he had a friendly wife. They kissed me without hesitation. Hamdi. He went to wash, leaving me alone. Not knowing what to do, as he did not introduce me to his wife, the guest. I stood in the middle of his room. His wife is standing by the door and He was staring at me unnoticed. He thought for a while. I guess from your mind. Here, sit down, mean it's over. But then not seeing the need for it. Slowly slipped out. Not always negligent, even paying close attention to such rules. Owes some of his success in life to this attention. The reason why Hamdi, who was the one who left me like this, left me in the middle. I think it is one of the essential customs of men who have taken important positions. One of them, I think, against his old and lagging friends. What they showed was a bit of conscious absent-mindedness. Then, until then you. Enough to suddenly say you to their friends whom they call you. Being humble and fatherly, interrupting one's word. Cut off and ask something randomly meaningless and do it quite naturally, even. To do it many times with a smile full of compassion and mercy. I had come across all of these so many times in the last few days that I told Hamdi. It didn't even occur to me to be angry and offended. Just get up and nobody. To go without notice and get rid of this troublesome situation. I think. But meanwhile, an old villager in a white apron and a headscarf. The woman, in her patched black stockings, brought coffee without a sound. I sat down on one of the navy blue armchairs with embroidery flowers on it. I looked. Family and artist photos on the walls, ladies on the side. On a bookshelf that appeared to be. They had fashion magazines. Lined up under a cigarette chair. The few albums that were found were quite battered by the guests. It looked like. I bought one of them because I didn't know what to do. Before I even opened it, Hamdi appeared at the door. With one hand she combs her wet hair, with the other she pulls the open-collared white current shirt. He was buttoning up his buttons. "Well, how are you? Tell me," asked. "Never. I told you." He looked pleased to have stumbled upon me. Possibility. That you can show the levels he has reached, or. He was glad he wasn't like me. For some reason, in life. A disaster has befallen the people we walked with for a long time. When they see that they are in any trouble, they take these troubles on their own. He feels relieved as if he's swept away, and to those poor people, as if to us. Caring and compassion, as they bring the troubles that may come upon themselves. We would like to show you. Hamdi seemed to address me with the same feelings. Do you write or something? Said. Sometimes. Poetry, story. Does it do any good? I just laughed. He said, drop those things, dear, your practical life. From their achievements, from the school desks of vain things like literature. Then he mentioned that it could only be harmful. Answer him. Never thinking that it can be given, discussed. He talks like he's giving advice to a little boy, and he uses that courage in life. He never fails to show with his attitudes that he has taken from his success. He didn't hesitate. On my face, it's quite foolish. He looks at her with a smile that I feel and looks at him with a smile that I feel. I was giving him more courage. "Come to me tomorrow morning," he said. "Let's see, we'll think of something." You're a smart kid, I know, you weren't very hardworking, but it doesn't matter. Life and necessities teach people many things. Don't forget, come early to see me. While saying these things, he was one of the notable slackers in the school. He seemed to have completely forgotten what it was. Or do it here. 'Cause he's sure I can't hit him in the face. Was speaking recklessly. He made a movement that seemed to get up, and I immediately straightened up and held my hand. By extending. "Let me go," I said. "Why, dear, it's early." "But you know. I forgot you invited me to dinner." I remembered at this moment. But he seemed to have completely forgotten. I came to the door. When buying my hat. "Greetings to the lady," I said. Okay, come to me tomorrow. Don't be sad, my dear," saying my back. Caressed. When I went out, it was completely dark, the street lamps. It was burned. I took a deep breath. Even if the air is mixed with some dust. It felt incredibly clean and refreshing. I walked heavily. The next day, around noon, I went to Hamdi's company. However, yesterday, I had no intention of doing this when I left his house in the evening. Already a clear asterisk. Was not present either. Let's see, we think something, we do something. Like the principality that I am used to hearing from every benefactor I apply to. He had said goodbye to me with words. Nevertheless, I went. From a hope inside me. Rather, for some reason, there was a desire to see myself improvised. Almost. To my soul, you listened without making a sound last night, and it was against you. You let him take a benevolent attitude, let's see, do this to the end. I wanted to say, you deserve it. The janitor first took me to a small room and made me wait. Next to Hamdi. When I enter, your stupid smile of yesterday is on my face again. I felt that I was found and even more angry with myself. Lots of papers lying in front of him and lots of papers coming and going in and out. He was busy with the officer. He showed me a chair with his head and went to work. Continued to care. I sat on the chair without daring to shake his hand. I connected. Now in front of him, he was really my supervisor, even my benefactor. He is astonished as he is and gives this treatment to myself that has descended so low. I was deserving of it. With my school friend who took me to his car on the road last night. Let me go, I said. Why, dear, it's early. But you know. I forgot you invited me to dinner. I remembered at this moment. But he seemed to have completely forgotten. I came to the door. When buying my hat. Greetings to the lady, I said. Okay, okay, come to me tomorrow. Don't be sad, my dear, saying my back caressed. When I went out, it was completely dark, the street lamps. It was burned. I took a deep breath. Even if the air is mixed with some dust. It felt incredibly clean and refreshing. I walked heavily. The next day, around noon, I went to Hamdi's company. However, yesterday, I had no intention of doing this when I left his house in the evening. Already a clear asterisk. Was not present either. Let's see, we think something, we do something. Like the principality that I am used to hearing from every benefactor I apply to. He had said goodbye to me with words. Nevertheless, I went. From a hope inside me. Rather, for some reason, there was a desire to see myself improvised. Almost. To my soul, you listened without making a sound last night, and it was against you. You let him take a benevolent attitude, let's see, do this to the end. I wanted to say, you deserve it. The janitor first took me to a small room and made me wait. Next to Hamdi. When I enter, your stupid smile of yesterday is on my face again. I felt that I was found and even more angry with myself. Lots of papers lying in front of him and lots of papers coming and going in and out. He was busy with the officer. He showed me a chair with his head and went to work. Continued to care. I sat on the chair without daring to shake his hand. I connected. Now in front of him, he was really my supervisor, even my benefactor. He is astonished as he is and gives this treatment to myself that has descended so low. I was deserving of it. What a great conversation between me and my schoolmate, who picked me up in his car on the road last night, in a little over 12 hours. Matter was settled. Arranging relations between people. How ridiculous the factors are, how outwardly, how empty and especially. It was something that had little to do with humanity. Neither Hamdi nor I had really changed since last night. We were what we were, yet it's about me. Some of the things I learned about him, some minor and detailed. Things had taken us in separate directions. The strange thing is, we both accepted this change as it was and found it natural. My anger is not at Hamdi, not at myself, it's just here. It was a meeting. At a moment when the room was secluded, my friend raised his head and said, I have a job for you. I found it. Then he stared into my face with those bold and expressive eyes. He added, so I invented a job. It's not tiring. In some banks. And especially you will follow our work in our own bank. Something like a liaison officer between the company and the banks. You sit inside, mind your own business, as much as you want. Write a poem. I talked to the principal, we will appoint you. But you. We will not be able to give much for now, 40 and 50 liras. In the future, of course, it will increase. Let's see. Successes. He held out his hand before getting up from his chair. I got stung and thanked. There was sincere satisfaction on his face that he had done me a favor. In fact, he is not a bad person at all, he only fulfills the necessities of his position. That you have done, and that it may indeed be necessary, I think. But when I got out, I paused in the hallway for a while and, between going to the room he described to me and leaving it, I was very hesitant. Then slowly, with my head in front of me, a few steps, I walked into the room of the translator Raif Effendi, the first janitor I came across. I asked. The man pointed to an unspecified door and passed. I stopped again. Why couldn't I leave? 40 lira monthly sacrifice? I couldn't. Otherwise, he has acted shamefully against Hamdi. Wasn't I afraid of being? No. Unemployment for months. Not knowing where to go, where to look for a job when I get out of here. And now I'm completely in the grip of discouragement. That's what keeps me in that dim hallway and who's going through it. It was these that made the other janitor wait. Finally, I opened a random door and saw Raif Effendi inside. I didn't know him before. Despite this, he was bent over his desk. I immediately felt that this man I had seen could not be anyone else. Where did this opinion come from? I think Hamdi told me, our German translator Raif Effendi. I had a table set up for you in his room, he silently, godlike. He's a man, he won't hurt anyone. Then everyone. He still referred to her as the master at this time when he was called a lady. Probably the imagination created in my head by these recipes, the gray hair I saw there. Without any hesitation, as he looks a lot like a man with tortoiseshell glasses and a long shave. To the person who came in, looking up at me with his head and eyes. You are Raif Effendi, aren't you? I asked. He stared at me for a while. Then a light and almost cowardly, with voice. Yes, it's me. I think you're the officer who came to us just a moment ago. They have prepared your table. Here you go, welcome, he said. I went to the chair and sat down. Faded ink on the table. I started to watch the spots and lines. Facing a stranger. Secretly spying on my roommate, as is customary when sitting. Scrutinize, squint at the first, and, of course, wrong. I wanted opinions. But he never had this desire. That he didn't feel it, and bowing his head again to the work in front of him, I was in the room. I saw you were busy as if I wasn't there. This situation continued until noon. I now blind my eyes. I planted it in front of me. The top of her short cropped hair had begun. From under her small ears to her neck. Wrinkles were growing. The papers in front of his long, thin-fingered hands. He was moving around and translating without any trouble. Every now and then, he raises his eyes, as if to think of a word he can't find, and when our gazes meet, he looks up at his face. It was a gesture like a smile. Although he looks quite old when viewed from the side and from above, his face has an astonishingly pure and childish expression, especially at moments of laughter like this. There was. His yellow and undercut mustaches make this expression more evident. Was strengthening. On the way to lunch at noon, he did not move from his place. A piece of bread wrapped in paper in front of it, opening one of the eyes of his table. And I saw you pull out a little grouse eye. Enjoy your meal. I left the room. Even though we sat across from each other in the same room for days, almost. We didn't talk anything. With many of the officers in other services. They met and even went out together in the evening to play backgammon in a cafe. We even started. According to what I learned from them, Raif Effendi. He was one of the oldest civil servants of the establishment. Before this company was founded. Before, he was the translator of the bank we are affiliated with. What happened there? No one remembered when the time had come. Quite a crowded. It was said that he had a family and that he could only live on the wage he received. This. The company that spends a lot of money on this and that, despite being a senior in between. When asked why he did not increase his salary, the young officers laughed. He's a slouchy one. It's doubtful that he even speaks the language properly. They were saying. However, he knows German very well and I later learned that the translations were very accurate and beautiful. Ash and fur arriving via the Yugoslavian port of Susak. The quality of the timbers or the processing style of the sleeper drilling machines. And easily translates a letter about spare parts. The specifications and contracts translated from Turkish to German were submitted to the company. Sent the manager to their place without hesitation. Is left vacant. At times, without opening the eyes of the table and taking it out from there, absent-mindedly. He saw that he was reading a book absent-mindedly and one day, "What is it, Mr. Raif?" saying. I asked. Read as if I caught him doing something wrong. Stammering, "No, a German novel," said and immediately had closed. Despite this, no one in the company had a foreign language. He didn't think he would know. Maybe. He also had rights, for in his demeanor he was a man who knew no language. Did not have. When speaking, a foreign word comes out of his mouth. At the time it was not heard that he spoke a language. Foreign newspapers and magazines were not seen in his hand or in his pocket. The summary, with all its assets, we speak Frankish, shouting. He had nothing to do with humans. Based on his knowledge. Not wanting to be increased, looking for other and well-paid jobs. Strengthened this opinion. He arrives on time in the morning, eats his lunch in his room. In the evenings, after doing his small shopping, he immediately goes home. Was going. He's willing to come for coffee even though I've offered it a few times. It didn't happen. They wait at home, she said. A happy family man, I thought. She longs to be reunited with her children as soon as possible. Never after. I have seen that this is not the case, but further than these. I will talk about it. This persistence and diligence of his. It did not prevent him from snoring. Our Hamdi, Lord Rafe. If he finds a small typographical error in his translations, he immediately slaps the poor man. He was calling, and sometimes he would come to our room and boil him. Always more wary of officials, and each of them does not show any favor. Afraid of getting a bad response from these young people who are. That my friend knew that he would never dare to retaliate. The fact that he beat Raif Effendi so much was for a translation that was delayed by a few hours. It's fine for him to turn red and shout to the whole building. It was easy to understand, it made people have power over one of their own kind. And what intoxicates so sweetly as to test one's powers? Especially this. Opportunity to do so, due to some fine calculations, but certain. If he shows himself to anyone. Raif Effendi occasionally fell ill and could not come to the apartment. These are many times. They were insignificant colds. But many years ago. A pleurisy, he said, had made him too cautious. In a small. He shuts himself up in his house immediately. When he goes out, he wears woolen undershirts in layers. He wears clothes, never opens a window when he is in the flat, and in the evening, he puts scarves around his neck and ears, and is thick but slightly. He didn't leave until he had lifted the collar of his frayed coat. Patient. He never neglected his work. Manuscripts to be translated. With the concierge. He was sent home and removed a few hours later. Despite this, the manager and our Hamdi's treatment of Raif Effendi, look, we're not kicking you out despite your whiny, sick state. He had something to say. Then hitting him in the face at once. They do not hesitate, after a few days of absence, every time he comes, he says. How? I hope it's over now, with a needle. They would greet them with greetings. However, now I'm tired of Raif Effendi too. I was starting. I didn't sit very long in the company. I have a document. Banks and government offices whose orders we accept. Wanders, from time to time, to issue this document and send it to the manager or the manager. I was sitting at my desk to explain to his assistant. This. Enough to make me doubt that he is alive at the table opposite me. Sitting still, translating, or in the eye of his drawer. This man who reads the German novel is really pointless and boring. I came to the conclusion that it was a creature. With something in your soul. That one cannot resist the desire to express them. He thinks, in such a quiet and indifferent person. Guess that there is a life that is not much different from that of plants. I used to, coming here like a machine, doing their job, understanding. He reads some books with a habit I don't know and does his shopping in the evenings. He was returning home. Chances are, This is exactly what it looks like. In many days and even years, times of sickness are the only. It was change. According to your friends, he's been like this. Was living. That he was excited in any way. Had never seen before. The most unjust and unjust of their superiors. Always responds to his accusations with the same calm and expressionless look. He typed the translations and asked them always with the same meaningless smile when he received them. And he was thankful. One day again, just because the typewriters did not give importance to Raif Effendi. I drove Hamil to our room for a translation that was late because of him. Came in a rather stern voice. How long are we going to wait? You still haven't brought the translation of the letter from the Hungarian company. She cried. The other, quickly getting up from his chair, said, I'm done, sir. The ladies couldn't write. Other jobs have been given. He said. I didn't tell you this was all in a rush. Me? Yes, sir, I told them too. Hamdi shouted even more. Do the job assigned to you instead of answering me. And the door. Hit it out. Raif Effendi came out after him and started begging the typewriters again. Gone. I'm trying to cast a little evil eye at me during this whole pointless scene. I thought of Hamdi, who didn't even need it. Meanwhile, re-entering. The German translator took his place and bowed his head. Human face. There was that unshakable calm that led to astonishment and even anger. One in hand. He took a pencil and started scribbling on the paper. Not writing. He was drawing some lines. But this gesture of an angry man? It wasn't that he was unconsciously preoccupied with anything. Even. At the corner of his lips, just below his yellow mustache. I seemed to see a confident smile appear. Hand of paper. It moves slowly over him, and he stops and squints his eyes. He was staring straight ahead. Satisfied with what he saw. I could tell by that vague smile on his face. Finally. He put the pen down beside him and watched for a long time the paper he was scribbling. I looked at him without taking my eyes off him. This time it's brand new on your face. I was surprised to see that an expression appeared, as if pitying someone. Had a condition. I couldn't stop myself out of curiosity. When I get up he straightened up and went back to the typewriter's room. I jumped right away, one step. I arrived at the opposite table and saw the paper on which Raif Effendi had drawn something. I bought. When I took a glance at this, I was stunned. I could see Hamdi on a piece of paper the size of his palm. 5/10 simple. But within the marvelously ingenious line the whole. He had the identity. It is unlikely that others will find the same resemblance. I don't think so, maybe even when investigated one by one, maybe nothing. He didn't look like him, but how he had just been in the middle of the room. There was no way to go wrong for a person who saw him screaming. with a beastly rage and an indescribable vulgarity, afflicted. This mouth, which stands open in the form of, although he wants to pierce the place he looks at, he is helpless. These streaky eyes that seem drowned in them, wings, exaggeratedly widening to the cheeks and thus to the face. This nose giving a wilder expression. Yes, this was a few minutes ago. Standing over there was a picture of Hamdi, or rather of his soul. But my amazement. That was not the reason, since I joined the company, that is, for months, Hamdi. I kept making a lot of contradictory judgments about it. Sometimes I was trying to excuse myself, and I was making amends many times ***. Royal. His personality and the personality given to him by his present position. Mixes it up, then wants to separate them, and it's a complete stalemate. I was entering. Here is Hamdi, which Raif Effendi revealed with a few lines. Even though I wanted to see it for a long time. It was the person I couldn't see. To all the primitive and wild expression of his face. There was a pitiful side though. There is no participation of cruelty and misery. It has not been shown so clearly in the place. It's like 10 years. I really got to know my friend for the first time today. At the same time, this picture suddenly explained Raif Effendi to me. Now you can see his unshakable calmness in his relations with people. I could well understand his strange shyness. Who knows his surroundings so well? A person who sees the inside of the other person so sharply and openly. There is a possibility to get excited and angry with anyone. Was it? Such a man is to someone who is fluttering in front of him with all his smallness. What could he do other than stand like a stone? All our condolences. Our denials ********, our rages, our incomprehensible, unexpected side. Ready for anything and. Is it possible to shake a person who knows what can come from whom? Raif Effendi took on an interesting nature for me again. Despite the light that had just appeared in my head about him, I sensed contradictions. The precision in the lines of the picture I'm holding in my hand. It was showing that it wasn't. Whoever did this will spend many years with the picture. He had to be busy. Here's a guy who really sees what he's just looking at. Not an eye, but a person who knows how to detect what he sees with all its subtleties. There was also the trick. Door opened. I wanted to put my hand on the table quickly. But I was late. Your letter from the Hungarian company. As if apologizing to Raif Effendi, who approached me with his translations. It's a beautiful picture, I said. I thought she'd be surprised, afraid I'd reveal her secret. This has never been the case. With his usual strange and pensive smile. Taking it away from me. Years ago, I was busy with painting for a while, he said. Search. Turn, I'm scribbling something by hand. You see. Pointless things. Boredom is just. He crumpled the picture in his palm and tossed it into the paper basket. "The typewriter ladies wrote in such a hurry," he muttered. "I suppose there are mistakes, but if I try to read Hamdi Bey, I'll piss him off. He's got the right. Let me just take it away." He went out again. I followed him with my eyes. "He has the right. He's got the right," I muttered. After that, every state of Raif Effendi was really meaningless, and even his insignificant movements began to intrigue me. To talk to him, to learn something about his true identity. I took advantage of the opportunity. He noticed my too gregariousness. It seemed not, to me, kind, but always spaced out. He kept his demeanor. No matter how far our friendship progresses from the outside, has always been closed to me. Even his family, his situation among this family. When I saw it up close, my curiosity about it increased completely. To herself. Each step I take to get closer presents me with many new mysteries. He was pacing. I went to his house for the first time during one of his usual illnesses. "Hamdi, send a letter to be translated by tomorrow with a janitor." He wanted to give it to me. I'd be visiting, I said. "Well, see what's up. It's gone too far this time." Indeed, this time his illness lasted a little longer. Since a week, he was not visiting the company. One of the janitor's house in İsmet Paşa neighborhood. Described. The season was midwinter. Early. I started walking in the dark streets. Asphalt paved in Ankara. I passed narrow neighborhoods with rough pavements that did not resemble roads at all. There were ups and downs one after the other. At the end of a long road, almost where the city ends, I took a left turn and entered the coffee shop on the corner. I learned about the house, two standing alone among the stone and sand piles. Multi-story yellow-painted building. Raif Effendi was sitting downstairs. I knew. I rang the bell. A 12-year-old girl opened the door. When he asked about his father, he made a fake face and licked his lips. Bending over, "Here you go," she said. The interior of the house was not at all what I thought. As a dining room. In the hall, which seems to have been used, a large foldable table was on the side. There was a buffet filled with crystal sets. A beautiful Shiva's rug on the floor. He was standing still, the smells of cooking wafting out of the kitchen next door. "Girl." He took me to the guest room first. "The stuff here is also nice, even expensive." Were things. Red velvet armchairs, low walnut smoking tables, and a huge radio on the side filled the room. All around the tables, finely embroidered, cream-colored lace and a sign of the creed hung in the shape of a ship. The little girl brought coffee a few minutes later. Somehow it's always on your face. There was a spoiled expression that wanted to humiliate me, to make fun of me. as I take the cup from me. My father is sick, sir, he can't get out of bed, you guys come in. She said. While saying this, I am not worthy of this kind treatment. It was as if he wanted to show with his eyebrows and eyes that I was not. When I entered the room where Raif Effendi was sleeping, I was completely surprised. This is your house. A Layli school dormitory, unlike any other. Or a row of white bedsteads side by side like a hospital ward. It was a small room where he stood. Raif Effendi was in one of these beds. He lies half-sitting under the covers and starts to greet me from behind his glasses. Was working. I looked for a chair to sit on. 2 in the room. On the chair were woolen cardigans, women's socks. It was filled with several discarded silk dresses. On one side, the cherry-bruised plain dress with the door half open. Clothes, suits, and under them hung randomly in her closet. There were knotted bundles. An astonishing confusion reigned in the room. Was going on. On the nightstand at Raif Effendi's bedside, there was a tin. A dirty plate of soup on a tray that looked like it was noon, mouth open. A small jug and next to it, lots of them in bottles or tubes. Medicine was on. Sick man. Sit here, dear. He pointed to the foot of the bed. This is how I hooked up. On the other's back, elbows pierced, mottled. She was wearing a knitted woolen cardigan. Head caught white. He was leaning on his rails. His clothes are on my side. It was hanging on top of each other at the foot of the bed. The host, who felt that I was reviewing the room, said, I'm here with the kids. I sleep together. They're cluttering the room. The little house anyway. We can't even fit. He said. Are you crowded? Well, quite a few. I have an adult daughter who goes to high school. And you see. Then my sister-in-law and her husband, my 2 brothers-in-law. Always. We are sitting together. My sister-in-law also has children. 2, in Ankara. Home is known. There's no way to leave. Meanwhile, the bell is ringing outside, loud and shouting. From the conversations, it was understood that someone from the family had come to the house. 1. The door to the ajar room opened. He's in his 40s, his cut hair. A stout woman entered, with flaking over her ears and face. Raif. He bent down and said something in his master's ear. Without the other answering it. Pointing at me. From the flatmates, he introduced my refutation. Then turning to his wife, take it from my jacket pocket, said. This time, the woman said without leaning in her ear, I'll, for the money. I didn't come, who will go and get it? You couldn't get up either. Send Nurten. The place is 3 paces. How can I send a child as big as a leg to the grocery store at night? In this cold. And then the girl. Even if I say go, will she listen to me? Raif Effendi thought and thought, then, as if he finally found a solution. Shaking his head like, "Go, go," he said and looked ahead. After the woman left, she turned to me and said, "Buying bread in our house is an issue. Did we get sick? They can't find a man to send them," he said, as if it were my duty. "Your brothers-in-law are younger?" I asked. He looked at my face, reply. Did not. Even the expression of his face made him feel like he had never heard of my question. Was leaving. But a few minutes later. "No, they're not small," she said. "They're both going to work. They're just like us." Officer. Bacanak is in the Ministry of Economics. He got a job. They didn't read it. They don't even have a middle school certificate. Then, suddenly interrupting, he asked, "Did you bring something for translation?" "Yes, we need splitting. They'll send the janitor in the morning." He took the papers and placed them beside him. "I was wondering about your illness too." "Thank you. It took a long time. I can't get up." There was a strange look in his eyes. Is my connection true? He seemed to be investigating. I was ready to do many things to make him believe. But for the first time that he expressed any excitement. The eyes I saw quickly turned to their old expressionlessness and that usual. They turned into empty smiles. I sighed and got up. Suddenly he straightened up and took my hand. "Thank you for your visit, son," said. There was warmth in his voice. He seemed to sense what I was going through. Indeed, after today, a close relationship has developed between us and Raif Effendi. It happened. I don't think his treatment of me has changed. I can't say. Especially that he was sincere with me, that he opened up to me. It wouldn't even cross my mind to argue. It's always the same. Remained a closed, silent person. Though some evenings together from the flat. He goes out and walks to his house, sometimes even going inside together. We had a coffee in the furnished guest room. But in the meantime, he doesn't talk or because of the weather, the expensiveness of Ankara. We used to talk about the disorder of the pavements in İsmet Paşa neighborhood. He rarely said anything about his home, his children. Occasionally, the girl got a broken number from the Riazia asterisk again. She says, then immediately speaks. Would change. I was too afraid to ask anything about it. The family members I met the night I visited him for the first time. It didn't make a good impression. When you leave the patient and pass through the hall, you can see the big table in the middle. A 6-year-old with two young men I saw lined up around him. The young girl huddled together, not waiting for me to turn around. They began to whisper and laugh. I have nothing to smile about. I knew. But these, like every empty person of that age, were the first. He was one of those who considered smiling in the face of someone he met as a sign of superiority. Even little Nerton was struggling to match her sister and uncles. I saw the same thing every time I went to this house afterwards. I have not yet. I was young, not more than 25 years old, but some young. This strange habit I see in people, what they don't know, what they see for the first time. The curiosity to consider a person something very strange, my amazement, was awakening. Raif Effendi's situation was not very pleasant, and this. Realize that in the crowd it seems too much and unnecessary. I was doing. Later, as I went to and from this house, with all of these children, I became a dude. They weren't bad people at all. They were just empty creatures. Their inconsistencies always came from here. In the face of the stretching emptiness of their inner. By flattering and insulting other people, laughing at them, they were able to satisfy themselves and become aware of their personalities. I would pay attention to their speech. The two youngest of the Ministry of Economics, Vedat, who was a civil servant, and Sayhat's flatmates, Raif Effendi's, the school friends of her eldest daughter Nekla. From tugging at them, wearing some clothes and seeing the strangeness of the movement only in others and making fun of it. They had nothing to do but laugh. What was that toilet that Mwala wore at the wedding, aisle? Key. Whoa. If you could see how the girls snapped at our Orhan. Ah. Ferhund Hanım, Raif Effendi's sister-in-law, and two 2-year-olds, aged 3 and 4. She finds the opportunity to deal with her child and leave them to her sister. As soon as he finds it, he puts on a silk dress and goes for a walk, hastily painted. He couldn't think of anything else but leaving. Himself only. Several times, in the mirror above the sideboard, her dyed and curled hair. I saw her trying to place it under her tulle hat. Quite a lot. Young, although he is only 30 years old, his eyes and mouth. Its edge was covered with numerous wrinkles. Bead blue eyes, where? He can't dwell on it for more than a second, and from the moment he was born. She echoed an unreasonable distress to which she was condemned. Tops. Their heads are always unkempt, their faces and hands are always dirty, and their moles are always. His pale children are haunted by an evil enemy he cannot understand. He gets angry like the 2 punishments he has given. He is dirty when he goes out to the street. How can you get them away from him so that they don't touch him with their hands? She didn't know that he would drive her away. Ferhund's husband, Nurettin, one of the branch managers of the Ministry of Economy. The gentleman was another version of our Hamdi. Salt 32 years old. Take care of your brown and wavy hair. How are you, after saying? Even then, they licked their lips together as if they had hurled great wisdom. It was a man who nodded slightly. While talking, he looks at the person's face with fixed eyes, and meanwhile his eyes are closed. Well, what you say is also bullshit. What do you know? Said a smile. After graduating from an industrial school, he was about to study leather business. For some reason it was sent to Italy, but there is only a little language, and he had learned to take important man manners. However, in life, they had important merits to be successful, once. With great confidence, he deems himself worthy of very high positions and knows to carry out ideas as soon as possible in every valley he does not know, everyone without exception. He was making people around him believe in his worth by begging for it. House. This sickness of laziness in their people has given them this adoration. I think it passed through your brother-in-law. Then pay close attention to your head. He shaves every day, wears his worn trousers under his own supervision. He irons tightly underneath, the most elegant of shoes, the most fancy of socks. I could spend a Saturday going from shop to find. He was singing. In fact, as I learned later, his salary was his and his. Only enough for his wife's clothing, the 32 brothers-in-law's hands. Since there is no benefit from 5 liras, all the expenses of the house are ours. Rafe was burdened with the master's meager wage. Despite this, poor at home, everyone's horn was beeping except the old man. Rafe Effendi, 40 more. Aged before his age, his limp flesh hanging down to his navel. Miray Hanım, his wife, who combines a strange fatness with her breasts. Cooking all day in the kitchen, piling up in his spare time. Patching up children's socks and your sisters each other. Although he spends his time looking after his flies. Could not be created. No one asks how the house turns, it's just because he considers himself worthy of a much higher life. To dislike, to sneer at something, to make anew. It was unpleasant. Nurettin Bey, what kind of thing is this, dear? I mean, it's almost like, where does the hundreds of liras I give go, God? For the sake of? Brothers-in-law, I didn't like this dish, cook me eggs. Or, I'm not full, fry me a sausage. Miray said to her sisters. They do not hesitate to remove it from the table and send it to the kitchen, and then they. When you needed 11 cents to buy bread in the evening, they took it out of their pockets. He couldn't bear to give it to Rafe Effendi, who was sick in his room. They wake up from sleep, as if that wasn't enough. Why is he still good? They were angry that he wasn't there and that he didn't go to the grocery store. To the misery of the parts of the house that are invisible to the eyes of the guests. On the other hand, the orderliness in the hall and the drawing room is to some extent. It was Necla's work. But others, too, tell their friends with whom they come in contact. Able to put a mask on the face of their opposite house in this way. They had found. Therefore, even with the participation of themselves, furniture. They have paid installments to their stores for years, they have had a lot of trouble. They were folded. But now the red velvet suits are appreciated by the guests. Makes them shake their heads, and the 12-lamp radio. It could make the neighborhood noisy. Gold lined up on the glass kiosk. The gilded crystal drink set, which he often brought and drank raki with. He never humiliated Nurettin Bey against his friends. Although Raif Effendi was the bearer of all these burdens, his absence at home. His existence was like an equation. Everyone from the smallest to the biggest. He didn't seem to notice. From daily needs and they talked nothing but money matters too many times. They preferred to handle it through Miray Hanım. As if lifeless. A machine goes out in the morning with some orders. He was returning in the evening with his arms full. 5 years ago, for Hund. At the time he wanted to marry the lady, Raif Bey followed him. Who do all kinds of roles to look nice, who go home after the engagement. To bring something to please your future brother-in-law on his arrival. Even Mr. Nurettin, who did not forget, is now the same as such a meaningless person. It was like he was bored sitting at home. Why is it more money? Why not earn a more luxurious life? They're angry that he didn't approve, but at the same time he's nothing. They were sure that there was an insignificant and worthless zero. Nekla, who looks like a very sane person, and even Nurten, who is still in primary school, are sure that her brother-in-laws, against their fathers, under the influence of their aunts and uncles, they obeyed the general weather. In the love they show him, it's a chore. A repulsive haste, in their dealings with his illness, a joke. There was a pretense of false pity shown. Lonely wife. That hasn't lightened for a second over the years. Miray Hanım, who seems a bit stupid with her work and livelihood problems. She is as busy as she can with her husband, her own children. He was making an effort not to be belittled or despised by them. When a guest is present for dinner, his brothers or Nurettin Bey, let my brother-in-law go and get it, out loud. Pulling her husband into the bedroom so as not to give in to her orders. In a voice that tried to be sweet, come on, get 8 eggs from that grocery store. Get a bottle of raki. Let's not remove them from the table now. Why her husband and herself did not sit at these tables in 40 years. If they were going to do that, why would it be as if they had a grudge against the others? Now they see that they are met with uncomfortable looks as if they have been disrespected. He wasn't thinking either, maybe he didn't even notice it. Raif Effendi also had a strange Rika asterisk towards his wife. Since months. No time to put on anything other than a kitchen dress even once on your back. It was as if he really took pity on this woman who could not find him. Now and again. How are you, ma'am? Are you very tired today? He asks, sometimes the situation of the children to pass the class by taking them in front of them, the approaching holiday. She talked about her expenses. But he is happy with the slightest spiritual bond to other family members. There were no signs to show that it was. Sometimes you look at your eldest daughter. He sewed it up, as if expecting something from her, something warm and sweet. But these moments pass quickly, a pointless creak of her child, and unwarranted. With his smile, it was as if the space between was suddenly revealed. I thought a lot about these states of Raif Effendi. Such a man, what kind of man, I didn't know either, but I was sure he wasn't what he seemed. Yes, such a allowing the man to voluntarily escape from the people closest to him. Did not have. The whole point is that those around me don't know him, and he will make any attempt to promote himself. Was not a man. After that, to thaw the ice, these people, their terrible strangeness towards each other. There was no way to fix it. How difficult is it for people to get to know each other, rather than attempting this laborious task because they know that it is like wandering around randomly, and only as they collide. They prefer to be aware of its existence. Only, as I said, Raif Effendi is one of his elder daughter, Nekla. Things seemed to wait. In the movements of your face, mouth, hands. Who imitates his painted aunt in playing? Despite these thick outer shells, signs that will make you think that there is something of a real person left in it, was available to bring his arrogance towards his father to the level of insult. Sometimes real indignation is felt when I scold his working brother Nurten. When Raif Effendi is mentioned with great respect at the table or in the room. There was a quick knock on the door. But these states are hidden in one of the few moves that humanity has made to breathe from time to time. It consisted of many years of patient work, and its environment was formed by years of patient work. The false personality will not allow his original identity to rebel. Was so strong. But, perhaps with the impatience of my youth, Raif Effendi's, I was resentful of this almost dreadful silence. Whether at the company or at home, people who were completely alien to him spiritually. Not only does he tolerate them not counting, but it's almost like a hit in it. Was finding. Although they are not understood by those around them, they are always one of these loneliness of people who are given wrong judgments over time. I knew they were starting to feel pride and bitter pleasure, but nothing. Time around. I could not imagine that they would justify this move. On many occasions, I realized that he is not a man with feelings. I had. In fact, on the contrary, he is very touchy, very thin-looking. And he was careful. Nothing from your eyes that seemed to look only in front of you. He was not running. One day your daughters are out for coffee that will be brought to me. Each other in slow voices, you cook, that they argued. Heard it, never spoke, but a second time 10 days later. When I go to their house, they call out immediately. Don't cook coffee, it doesn't drink, he said. This is what he did in order not to see the repetition of this event, which was difficult for him. The fact that he made me private to him in the act. It caused me to connect. We still hadn't talked about anything yet. But I was no longer amazed by it. His quiet life, his toleration against people's weaknesses. His gaze with pity and amusement at his rudeness is not enough willpower. Was it? A person who goes by my side when we walk together. Didn't I feel it with all my might? At this time, People looking for each other, finding each other and getting inside each other. Why you absolutely need to talk for them to watch. Not, why some poets are tall, in the face of the beauty of nature. I realized that they were looking for someone to go without speaking to them. By my side. This man who walks without opening his mouth, who works in front of me without making a sound. Who taught me for years, even though I did not know well what I learned. That I learned more from someone than I could ever learn. I was sure. I felt that he was happy with me too. Every person and first. The timid and shy attitude he showed towards me when we met. But some days he suddenly turns wild, his eyes wide. Loses expression, shrinks, and when addressed. He answered slowly, but in a voice that prevented any intimacy. In times like these, he neglects to translate, too many times. He was watching the papers in front of him for hours. Her. Now that all distances and time are withdrawn and I sensed that he wouldn't let anyone in there, and I made no attempt to snuggle. But I was filled with anxiety, because Raif Effendi's illnesses, by a strange coincidence, are often like this. I notice that you keep track of the days. The reason for this very quickly, but I learned in a very sad way. But I will explain everything in order. One day in mid-February, Raif Effendi did not come to the company again. When I stopped by his house in the evening, his wife Miray opened the door. "Here, is it you?" she said. "He just fell asleep. Let me wake you up." "No. Do not disturb." "How?" I said. The woman took me to the guest room. He has a fever. He's talking about pain this time too. Then a complaining. He added loudly, "Oh boy, he doesn't pay any attention to himself. It's not that, when there is nothing out there, suddenly he's getting dizzy." What's going on? I don't know. He doesn't sit and talk to people. He's going away. Then. And that's how he gets laid on the bed. Meanwhile, Raif Effendi's voice was heard from the next room. "Woman, quickly." He ran there. I was amazed. Who cares so much about his health? Wool flannels, scarves who do not know how to protect themselves. It is probable that this man will act in any imprudence. Was it? Miray Hanım came again and said. He woke up when the doorbell rang. "Here you go," she said. This time, I found Raif Effendi's situation a little smug. Very yellow. His breathing was very fast. Her usual childish smile gives me more. Rather, it sounded like a grin that strained the muscles of the face. His eyes too. It looked like he had run deeper under the glass. "What's wrong again, Mr. Raif? Get well soon." I said. "Thank you." There was a slight hoarseness in his voice. His chest is full when he coughs. Was shaking and growling. To quickly satisfy my curiosity, I asked. How did you catch yourself cold? It's probably going to be a cold. He stood for a long time staring at the white cover of his bed. The little boy tucked between his children and his wife's white cots. An iron stove had made the room too hot. Despite this, he looked cold. Pulling my comforter up to his neck. Yeah, I think I got a cold, said. After dinner last night. I went out. Did you go somewhere? No. I just wanted to walk around a bit. I don't know. I'm bored. Probably. I was surprised that he said he was bored with anything. I walked a little too long. I went to the agricultural institutes. I came to the bottom of the Kisiran slope. Did I walk fast? What is it? It was hot. I opened my front. The weather was windy too. The snow was drizzling. I must have been cold. At night, in snow and wind, on secluded roads, open your chest. Walking around for hours was not what one would expect from Raif Effendi. Are you bored with something? I said. He hastily replied. No, dear. It happens occasionally. Wandering around alone at night. I would like. Who knows, is the noise of the house bothering me? Then he hurriedly said, as if afraid of saying too much. I guess that's what happens when you get older, said. What child? He's at fault. Outside, there was noise and quick talk. Returning from school. The big girl came in, kissed her father's cheeks. How have you been? Daddy? Then he turned to me and shook my hand. Sir, it's always like this. Sometimes you think of it, and I go for some coffee. I'll go, he says. Then does he catch a cold there? Is he on the road? What's the cold? He gets sick. How many times has this happened? In coffee. I don't know what's wrong. He stripped off his coat and threw it on a chair, and immediately went outside. Output. Raif seems to have gotten used to the state of the Lord, and he is not very important. Was not giving. I looked at the patient's face. He turned his eyes to me, too. There was no explanation, no wonder. Why am I telling this lie to the people of the house? He wonders why he told me the truth, not what he said, but I was a little proud of that too, more to one person than to another. Proud of being close. As I went out and made my way home, I was lost in thought. I wonder. Raif Effendi is really simple and empty inside. Wasn't he a man? He has no purpose in life, no ambition. He has no interest in people, even those closest to him. It was sure. Then what did he want? He took her to the streets at night. I wonder if it's not this emptiness inside you, this aimlessness of your life. Was it? At this time, I saw that I was in front of the hotel where I was sitting. Here, too. I was sitting with a friend in a room where the bed was hard to fit. It was past 8 o'clock. Since I don't want to eat, I go to my room and I thought about reading some books, but gave up immediately. At this hour, the gramophone in the coffee house below it was loud enough. Raises him up and the Syrian bar artist lying in the room next to us goes to work. This is the squeakiest of Arabic songs while on the toilet to go. Was saying at the same time. Turning back on the muddy asphalt. I walked in the direction of Kisirin. Cars on both sides of the road. There were repair shops and shabby cafes. Then on the right, up the hill. Houses climbing to the left, somewhat in a pit, withered leaves. Gardens began. I lifted my collar. A quick and. The wind was blowing inside me, which I felt only when I was drunk. He had a great desire to walk and run. 4 hours, days. I thought I could go. Forgot to look around me. I had progressed. It's like someone pushing me from my chest because the wind is getting stronger. It was happening, and it gave me pleasure to struggle with this force and move forward. All of a sudden I thought about why I came here. No reason or anything. There was no. I had walked without making a decision. Your way. The trees on either side are groaning in the wind and clouds in the sky. He was running at great speed. Black and rocky hills ahead. It was still a little bright, and the clouds creeping up on them seemed to leave a piece of themselves here. My eyes. I slithered forward and inhaled the wet air. Rip it out of my head. The question I threw reappeared, why did I come here? The wind was yesterday. It was very similar to the evening, maybe a little later the snow will also be scattering. Would begin. Another man around here last night, his glasses. Steaming, his hat in his hand and his chest. He walked as if running, with his bosom open. The wind blew his short and sparse hair. Who knows how it ignites in his head, a coolness from outside. Was giving. What was in this head? This head, this sick, this old. Why had he dragged his body here? Raif Effendi's dark and dark. How you walked in the cold night, how your face took shape. I wanted to imagine. Now I understand why I came here. That I can see him and what's going through his head better here. I thought. But here I am, from the wind that wants to blow my hat. From the roaring trees and running into many shapes. I could see nothing but clouds. Live where he lives. To do so did not mean to live like him. Too naive to think so. And it was only necessary to be as heedless as I was. I quickly returned to the hotel. Gramophone of coffee and Syrian woman. The song was cut. My friend was lying on his bed, reading a book. To me. Took a sideways glance. What is it, are you from a licentiousness? Said. How well people understood each other. And I am like this. To get up and analyze the inside of another person's head. I wanted to see your confused soul. the world's simplest, most pathetic, even. What a wonderful and wonderful thing that will astonish even the dumbest man. He has a confused soul. Why does he avoid understanding this so much? And it is the most important thing to understand the creature they call human and to make a judgment about it. We think it's one of the easy things? Why is it that we see it for the first time? Although we avoided talking about the quality of cheese, the first chance, we make our final decision about the person we came to and feel comfortable. Are we going beyond? I didn't sleep for a long time. Raif Effendi in his white-covered bed. He lay on fire, sniffing the air radiating from the young bodies of his daughters and the tired limbs of his wife. Eyes. It was closed, and who knows where his soul was wandering. This time, Raif Effendi's illness lasted a little longer. As always, it didn't look like a simple cold. Nurettin brought the brain. The old doctor recommended mustard porridge and prescribed cough medicine. I am too. It stops by every 3 nights and each time it gets a little more depressed. I was finding, but he does not fuss too much and seemed insignificant. Perhaps from alarming the household. He was hesitant. The state of Miray Hanım and Nekla is really a concern to people. Seemed to give. Even thinking about doing business for years. The woman, who seemed to have forgotten, went to the patient's room in great astonishment. He goes in and out, scattering the towels or dropping the plate, always forgetting something inside or out and never. She was constantly sought after. Curved flat slippers on bare feet. He still sees them running in all 4 directions and sees every person they come across. I still feel their gaze that hangs on me as if asking for help. Although Nekla is not as lost as her mother, she has a great. She was in sorrow. He hasn't been going to school lately and he missed his father. She was waiting. When the evening musers come to check on the sick, I noticed from her red and swollen eyes that she had just cried. I was doing. But all this seemed to bore Raif Effendi more. He complained about it when we were alone, and even once. Well, what's going on with them? Are we dying right now? It had been said. It's like what would happen if we died. What to them? What am I to them? Then, he added, more bitterly and ruthlessly, I'm nothing to them. I was nothing. 4 years. We've lived together in the same house since. Wondering who this man is. They didn't. Now they're afraid I'll walk away. I said, oh, Mr. Raif. What kind of talk are these? A little too much though. They're in a hurry, but it's not right to interpret it that way. Your wife and your daughter.